Rebel. Reject. Create.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to Rebel, Reject, Create, the podcast all about creativity and how it works and what it does in the world. And today, my guest is Scott Homan, who, this has happened incredibly quickly. He is in the process of releasing an amazing music documentary film called The Witness Underground, which is pretty much about what you may think it is when you look at that title. And I mean, Scott's made a lot of movies, so I really wanted to speak to him about his process, his creativity, but also what on earth was going on with that movie. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate being on. Yeah, this is an exciting movie. It's my easily the most important movie I've made, and hope it's not the last, but it's happening right now. We're releasing it.
Yeah, so you're running a Kickstarter campaign which closes on November 18. So anybody watching this, the links here underneath the film.
Yeah.
So definitely click through and have a look.
What's cool about the Kickstarter is that we are releasing. You can get the film for the first time right now. It's downloadable, and the soundtrack's amazing. It has 40. Well, the movie has 42 songs in it. The soundtrack will have like the best 20 songs.
Brilliant.
We're still putting some things together. There's 32 albums of the music from inside of this faith community and the music that they made as they were exiting. We'll get into that, I'm sure. And then 9 books from people around the world who have come forward and said, like, hey, we want to be a part of this. Let's donate our art to getting this film its legs and getting out in the world.
Yeah. When the movie starts, I'm like, okay, so these are obviously people who were doing this in secret, and that's what resulted in them being kicked out of the witnesses. And it's like, no. And then they start talking about why they were making music. And there's so much like really interesting emotional, psychological stuff going on there. What I wanted to ask you was like, what did you learn about the power of creativity through making this movie and encountering these people?
So my journey, when you watch the film, you're sort of following a number of individuals that are all in their own bands in a music community. And I had my own band in like the far reaches of their reach of their website back in the 90s and early 2000s. And I found them because of their website in the early internet. And I was like, oh, there's other people like me who are making music. So I did know them, and my story is very autobiographical in the sense that I wanted to tell my story, but I didn't want to have myself in a movie. So I found these other people. But what was amazing about that is they were doing all kinds of diverse music, and there's something interesting I've actually learned recently is that one of the things we all did when we left this faith group was we all went back to music. Like music was the baseline that had carried us through some troubling tension internally, and then like we all went to it right away after leaving when we had kind of the rug swept out from underneath us. Like, okay, well, that was difficult and kind of terrible. I'm going to start a band. Let me get a guitar again and then go back to music. And it's definitely shaped my life when I was a youth, and I wanted to be a rock star like Nirvana. And then I went back to it and started doing covers again. And then all my friends, I made friends in the musician world, and I started making movies about including them in the movies, including their music and their band.
Yeah.
And I would say, look, to answer your question, processing trauma was probably what maybe I didn't think of it that way at the time, but it was like, okay, I need to do something that works, and that music worked.
Yeah, I mean, the one woman, the singer, she says, there's no therapy in the witnesses, and music became that for me.
Yeah. And her story, Cindy Elvendahl, her story is kind of like we have one story where there's a guy kind of logically, like his whole worldview is shattering, and then we have Cindy who's also going through a similar type mental worldview shift, but then she's like finding her voice and like rising as in finding her voice, and then her music becomes super powerful, and she starts singing about really profound, heavy stuff. And then you see her in the film, like her band taking off after getting out of the religion. Like now she finally has no restrictions to her music, and she has something really, really heavy to talk about. And so her band and her lyrics just like took off. High TV is that band. They're amazing.
Yeah. Do you think trying to make music under such restrictive circumstances was possibly a contribution to the quality of the stuff that was coming out? I mean, because some of those tracks are mind-blowingly good.
Yeah, I'm glad you recognize them for being good. They're an amazing. It's like an undiscovered high. Like you would have heard of these bands if they didn't have the restrictions that they had.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. Having restrictions can force you to get more creative. Like if you have everything's possible to you, every instrument in the building, like you might not even make any music. But if you only
What do I
have
choose?
one,
What do I choose?
right? Yeah, analysis paralysis or
Yeah.
something. But yeah, having like a tape recorder in the middle of a room and like mom's guitar and dad's drum set kind of situation is
Yeah.
what kind of initiated the whole nuclear gopher music scene. And they were like, okay, let's play it. We have it. And yeah, I think restrictions and also the lyrics are really interesting. They couldn't sing about God. They couldn't sing about their doubts or faith of any kind. And so they're left with like, well, I can sing about my ex-girlfriend and everyone's gonna relate to that thing. And then so like they had these like narrow secular window that they could operate in. And if they did want to sing about something heavy, they had to code the language that no one would possibly know. Um,
Right. So
which
there's
then might make it more general. Like then other people could relate to it in their own personal way rather than having a topic based song.
yeah. But that also makes it quite meta, doesn't it? And those songs are then operating on two totally different levels.
Yeah. Have you heard of code switching?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't understand code switching as much as I'd like to. I want to dive into that. But the idea that like in this group of people you use this language and this other group of people use this language and like you're using like different parts of your brain and like different it might maybe you could use it how I understand it in different language groups. Like in this way, I think and say these kinds of things, and this other group of people I can say these other kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think what was happening internally was like in front of these people who are um, like in the faith, and I know they'll rat me out if I say the wrong thing. Um, I have to use certain church code language for the in group, but then certain people that you trust, and a lot of the people in the bands were like a little bit more open minded,
Yeah.
so you could like be a little bit more free and open with them. Was some of the experience that I had, but I know that they had something like that going on as a community.
Yeah. In any circumstances, do you think it's inevitable that getting a bunch of young people together to be creative, whether it's music or movies or art, that they are going to just end up breaking all the rules and disobeying what they're supposed to be obeying? Do you think that's just part of an inevitability?
That's a great question. I feel like if you're making art, you're gonna say something about society. You're gonna say something about the society you're a part of. And one director friend of mine, he he likes to call movie making, and I think you could say the same thing about music and or any art, in that it's almost like a modern civilization version of the shamanic practice, in that there's this person who's far out of the community who's looking back at it and then saying like reflecting back what's happening or criticizing it in some way.
Yeah. I mean, that's the traditional classical role of the artist, right? The mirror of society. It's
Yeah,
interesting. So does that mean that the controlling organizations are right to be suspicious of highly creative people?
I think so. And
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I tell people like we grew up in a like North Korea style environment, or
Yeah.
maybe a Stalinistic, some kind of high authoritarian regime, that you could make a parallel to. And the first thing that all authoritarian regimes do is go after the artists, and then they want to control the narrative through their propaganda machine, which is a form of art, but it's a form of art to specifically manipulate the masses. Whereas general artists are just trying to reflect their own experience back into the world,
Yeah.
but to kind of create a cohesion in society. And definitely, this religion operates on that level of we are the only place that makes music, makes art, and we control the narrative of what you're allowed to talk about, and everything comes back to what their main objective is. And so to have something that's like totally aside from that was for them an amazing coping mechanism, because they don't it's hard to operate in that
Oh,
awash in the propaganda all day,
yeah. Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned that, you wanted to tell your story and that but you didn't want to be in the movie.
Mhm.
What for you is the most powerful thing that comes out of this whole narrative?
From this movie, Witness Underground.
Yeah.
One of the main, okay, there's three chapters of the movie. One is humanizing the Jehovah's Witness lived experience through the artists and through their archived music and movies. And that's something that most, like, usually people who are like in a cult, in a movie and about a cult, they're weirdos, they're other. So I wanted to
Mm,
do something where like it humanizes the person and the experience to show that like normal people are in this thing and they mean well and they're respectable people.
yeah.
And the main thing I wanted to talk about in the movie was shunning and demonstrate shunning, like actually walk us through what happens in a shunning and then demonstrate how dark it gets. But then a lot of movies also talk about that topic and show people suffering and then they roll credits. And then the thing that I've never seen, what we want to do is show and we have enough time going from when this all happened to present day. We could show the people on the outside where they've sort of landed and they
Yeah.
don't necessarily have like amazing, like celebrity level lives,
Yeah.
but they're people who have gone and created a life for themselves that they are happy with. And that's definitely better than what they came from. And I
Right.
want to demonstrate that you can land on the outside and that maybe music is a way to like shorten that.
So it's a
So
redemption story.
yeah, it's a coming of age redemption story.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. And
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in apartheid South Africa, very heavily invested in alternative music, underground stuff. And there it was
Yeah.
impossible to get hold of anything because state-controlled media, and it was
Oh
literally
wow.
anyone's parents who did business overseas would come back with like suitcases full of LPs and stuff.
Wow.
Um,
Cool.
and that relationship to music stays with me through to this day.
Yeah.
Do you think that kids today still feel like that about music outside of
Oh
those kind of
wow.
environments?
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because it's also the time we grew up. You had a
Yep.
much more extreme experience, but like I would go to the thing I would do after school is go to the CD store and listen to tracks and like buy the album. Or maybe
Yeah.
I could save up the $12 to buy the album someday. But I like wanted to love, I love music. Um, and yeah, because we went away from albums, we went away from physical art, which is like your relationship with the artist or that experience of choosing to now we have singles and Spotify, which isn't really a music scene. Spotify or whatever app uses, like it's all the music ever available on the planet at all times. And it's basically being curated to not upset you. So you're not going to get anything new really that way too
Right.
often.
Yeah. It's a bit like what you were saying earlier on. If you had all the instruments in the world, would you actually write a song?
Yeah.
If you have access to all the music in the world, what on earth are you going to listen to and why?
Right. Yeah, I wish I kind of that's a great question. We should get a 15-year-old in here and see what they think about music. Because I feel like now you're on an app and you're like, well, this soundbite for 15 seconds from who knows who is viral. And that's the relationship with music now.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what does that mean for creativity and for creative people, do you think? Looking to the future, to the next movie, to the next music.
Yeah. Society's definitely changed. Like you'll see, instead of seeing someone in the downtown busking with an instrument, you'll see someone with like a machine playing a track that they have on their
Yeah.
phone. So we're definitely in a different world. You're asking about my future project. Is that your
Yeah.
yeah? Hmm. Well, I did actually shoot another thing. I really am excited. Once this is out and it's getting seen in the world, I have another project that's in the can about rock climbers who live out of their cars in the deserts of the Western U.S. And they do this all over the place, all over the world, but specifically in the U.S. I have a friend who did it for like a year, lived out of their car and climbed, and it's like a thing. And I was like, okay, let's go shoot some rock climbing footage. And I also rock climb. And it just turns out like they all hang out. All the whole campground will come to like one campfire and then play music and hang out. And
Right.
there's like a freestyle rapper who's like half Chinese, half American, grew up in the States. And then there was another guy who's like he has a Guinness Book World Records for free soloing and he plays guitar and he freestyle sings. And then there's like this whole group of people came out with like an upright bass, even out in the desert. Like
What?
people have like acoustic instruments. There's like 10 people playing music and 30 people dance around a fire. And it's cold.
Wow.
It's like 0 Celsius. Everyone's dancing in their like puff jackets around a fire. And so I was filming with them for like 3 weeks. So I guess I was going to make a movie about rock climbing, but I actually made a movie about music and the culture of like camping while rock climbing.
Nice.
So music keeps on having a through line in my life.
Right.
And the previous film I did is called Hanoi Mixtape. But
Okay.
Yeah.
So if people want to know more and they want to support you, what exactly is the Kickstarter about at this stage? Because the movie's done. So talk us through this and how people can help and why it's important.
So we actually crowdfunded the production of Witness Underground in 2018 and went and shot it and then edited it. And it's common for films to crowdfund the release as well. So we're doing the releasing crowdfund.
Right.
And so the money that we get from this allows us to get it distributed independently. We're doing independent distribution. We have some options to distribute with a company, but there's a lot of reasons why not to do that in today's tumultuous thing. And there's a lot of now ways for independent artists to do their own distribution. And part of it, of course, is marketing. So this money is going towards the distribution and release. It's finishing funds. There's a lot that goes into what it takes, but we're going to get it onto Tubi for sure. And then there's like probably Amazon and Apple eventually. Those are options we have for sure. And then, those ones usually almost always say yes. And then there's like 38 smaller ones that are possibilities. We got into a library. So there's a lot to the distribution path.
Yeah.
So if you want to get involved, the money goes to, as I mentioned at the beginning, to getting the movie. You get the movie right away. The soundtrack, the extras, the 32 albums we didn't even get into it, but like this music community in Minneapolis is the Nuclear Gopher. And they made, I think 12 albums are in the crowdfund that were released and that are like, we were kind of like telling half the story because some of the people are still in the religion and they were like, well, I wouldn't put my music in that. So there's like a whole other, there's also amazing music. Anyway, so there's like 12 albums available from the Nuclear Gopher community, and there's 16 albums available from the exiting of the religion group, the post-Nuclear Gopher community. And then there's even more albums because I run a podcast called the Witness Underground Podcast, where I find more artists who've left cults and nefarious high control religions and difficult situations, and they've written music about it. And that's all available in the crowdfund too, along with a lot of authors, ebooks and physical books.
So you're not just
witnessunderground.com.
Cool. Link under the interview. And so you're not just supporting one thing, you're actually giving yourself access to a whole like wild west full of new and interesting music.
Exactly. And of many different genres too. There's like Riot Girl, indie rock, psychedelic rock, shoegaze, all kinds of interesting music. Twee pop is like a teenager style, but it's really cool music, catchy pop, all kinds of cool stuff. And I love it's been the soundtrack of my life. I'd like it to be the soundtrack of your life. And all those artists donated their art to the release of this movie because they believe in it.
Wow.
It's not just in some the higher levels that goes to them because they're going to be actually giving you physical copies. But anyway, and we're trying to support the artists. So they're donating now, but we support them and we're promoting their work. I'm almost like a promotion agent for a music studio.
It's a very expensive calling card. Scott, it's been awesome talking to you. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your schedule. If there's one last message about creativity, the power of music in this movie that you would want people to pay attention to, what would that be?
This is the only movie to humanize the cult experience and survival through self-expression in music. And music can shorten your difficult path to processing and healing from any kind of difficult situation. So if you're in a tough spot, like maybe pick up a guitar or write something, write a bad song, write a poem.
Awesome. Scott, thanks very much, mate.
Thanks.
Good
David.
luck.